Alright, well, I think I said this the other day, but I have to say it again. It's been a crazy 24 hours. Twitter bans Donald Trump, obviously, and they're purging Twitter of huge throngs of, I'm assuming, conservatives and probably some libertarians as well. Both the number of people I follow on Twitter and the people following me, both numbers have shrank by about 100 or so in the span of 24 hours. Now, to be clear, I actually don't think Twitter should be allowed to do this because of all the protections and unequal tax breaks and subsidies it receives from the government. Of course, we all know about Section 230. Twitter can't be sued as it's considered a platform, but it wants it both ways. It wants to be treated like a platform under the law, but then it wants to be more like a publisher and filter out what it deems to be okay for people to consume when it comes to their behavior. And it's weird because Twitter is pulling the card that this can be dangerous if people are allowed to say the things they're saying, especially in the context of what happened at the Capitol on Wednesday. Okay, where were you when the Women's March Twitter account in 2018 said they were going to shut down the Capitol, and then they were giddy when the Capitol shut down because of what they said? There wasn't any potential call to violence in that tweet. There was no explicit call to violence for sure, but since when does that matter to Twitter? If they suspect it, they'll put an end to it if you're a part of a certain political persuasion. So why no ban for them? Because it was a women's march, I'm assuming? And women wouldn't do that? Well, that sounds sexist, but I digress. Or how about AOC throughout the past half year saying things about how protests should make you feel uncomfortable, and that's the point. They're not supposed to be safe, I suppose. Okay, are you telling me you can't seriously imagine how that may lead to some violence? She is in no way giving the green light to people to do harm. Or how about, I don't know, a huge swath of leftists on Twitter egging on and defending the rioters that burnt down and destroyed innumerable businesses for months on end across the entire country, which resulted in the deaths of several people? Nothing for them. I don't think it's a huge step to say that Twitter might have a little bias on their hands, and to say otherwise I would consider to be slightly off base. So other than this, we forget sometimes about patent protections, and this is one of the reasons why I am really not comfortable with Twitter being allowed to do this. Because Twitter assuredly has these patent protections. It has patent protections on essentially tweeting. And a lot of other things like it, which who knows how many other companies might have popped up and been able to compete with Twitter, but those companies never came into existence because why bother when this larger company has the protection of government on its side? The other thing Twitter receives is nice unfair tax breaks. In fact, it didn't have to pay payroll taxes on its employees. Now, I'm never against a company trying to get out of paying taxes in our current absurd tax policy environment, but Twitter is receiving treatment that smaller competitors don't receive. And this is a problem libertarians can be very comfortable being pissed off about. If you're a large business, all of a sudden a whole world of loopholes and special privileges open up to you from your friend, the government, and people shouldn't put up with it. Twitter has also been subsidized directly, although to be fair, this doesn't account for too much money from what I've found. It only accounts for about a few $100,000, maybe a few million. It's still not okay, though. But all of these things mean that our tax money that we paid either directly or indirectly went to Twitter. And as long as that's the case, Twitter should not be considered some pure private company. They exist at the size they do now in no small part due to government. But other than this, I think what Twitter is doing is really dangerous for several reasons. First off, and this is the most obvious, they're putting people in an echo chamber. They're simply whitewashing everything and creating a huge feedback loop so people can't even choose what they want to hear. What they hear is chosen for them. If you're more on the left, congratulations. You'll be able to go on Twitter, and it's far less likely now that you'll have to be bothered with those opinions that you don't agree with. But as was said by Thomas Paine in Common Sense, if you support something like this, not only are you silencing the voice of others, even worse, you're denying yourself the right to hear what others have to say. And also, it should be said that anyone supporting Twitter and banning the president had better hope to high heaven things stay how they are now forever. And they better not hope that anyone in any position of power ever finds their opinion a potential problem, because then you'll be on the receiving end of censorship. The people supporting this are simply creating a rod for their own back to be used in the future. And not only this, Twitter is being very short-sighted. All they're doing is pushing these people supposedly on the right into darker, deeper corners of the internet where they fester and concoct new, crazier conspiracy theories, of which there actually are crazy conspiracy theories out there that are highly unlikely to be true. But why shouldn't they? You've silenced them, and in their minds they were banned because they're right, and Twitter was afraid other people may hear the truth they want to say. So you've likely just emboldened them even further. Not only that, some of them may eventually wear the Twitter ban as a badge of pride, as one of the good ones among the crazies. So the crazier that they get, the more people might listen to them. It reminds me of those old parental advisory stickers on CDs warning about explicit content. Artists would actively seek receiving those stickers because all of a sudden more people were drawn to the CDs. There's something edgy about this. This might not be as mundane as other things may be. In fact, I was always a little upset as a little kid because so many of the metal bands I liked never had those stickers, mainly because they just sang about dragons and elves and stuff, but that's besides the point. The point is that those stickers actually made a lot of music even more vulgar because artists would actively work to get them. So it had, in many ways, the opposite intended effect that Tipper Gore wanted. So this just won't be effective. If you don't think you've made the people you find to be dangerous even more pissed off and restless, then I don't know what planet you live on. If you're truly concerned with violence or danger, although there is no silver bullet against it, banning and silencing them certainly will not help and will not make it better. My last point is this, and I'll be quick about it. Because it's just something I've noticed. I just find it funny in all of this that leftists, who usually can be found screaming about curtailing the power of corporations or ending private property altogether or diminishing the power of all private companies, all of a sudden they're screaming about how Twitter is a private company and they can do what they want. Which, as I pointed out before, they're not a purely private company, but it's just funny to see the hypocrisy and the complete 180 that leftists can make on a dime. On one hand, private property should be ended. On the other hand, they're clinging so tightly to this idea that Twitter can ban and silence people because they're a private company. It's really interesting, and I would love to live in the world that they live in for a day just to see how insane it is. But that's all for now. Like and subscribe. It really is a huge help. You are all awesome, and take it easy.